to order of the
Oh, yeah.
Board of Building and Zoning Code Appeals of the City of Twinsburg, Ohio. Roll call, please.
Mr. Brown? Here. Mr. Wilden?
Here.
Mr. Kanzler?
Here.
Mr. Griffith?
Here.
Mr. Jameson?
Appears to be absent. Can we all rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Anybody look at the minutes? Have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
roll call.
Mr. Wilner?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Kanzler?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
We have one item on the agenda, and that is a request to have a shooting gallery by the Gander Mountain property. Building commissioner had denied the request, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to you just to introduce the issue.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, when will we be doing the public participation part? Will that be before or after the parties present their case?
Before.
Before? Okay. So after I finish, we'll invite public.
I will ask people who intend to participate to come up here and be sworn in. And then we'll go right to Keith.
To Keith, okay. So I had asked the chair prior to the beginning of the meeting to be able to make a couple brief, very brief, I promise, remarks at the outset, as I don't believe we do a lot of appeals of administrative decisions. So first off, this is obviously different than a variance, which I would say is the normal stock and trade of the BZA here in Twinsburg. But the charter and the code also does grant the BZA the authority to have essentially appellate jurisdiction over administrative decisions that are made by city administrative officers. The standard generally is that tonight you will hear Keith testify briefly about what his decision was, and then you'll hear the applicant talk about why they believe Keith's decision was made in error, essentially. And at the end of that, you'll have the opportunity to decide whether or not you want to sustain and affirm Keith's decision as building commissioner for the city, or overturn it and essentially accept the appellant's appeal that Mr. Folk's decision was in error. And finally, before we move into public participation, for the board's edification, I always like to set out the question that's going to come before the board. So here, earlier this year, the Midwest Shooting Center put in an application to have a retail firearms operation along with an indoor shooting range. The city's building commissioner, in a letter that he'll go into a little bit more detail, ultimately, or I guess I'd say effectively, affirmed in part and denied in part. So Keith found that the retail sale piece of the application for the business registration would fall under a principally permitted use in that district, which was the sporting goods use. But he further determined that the indoor range component was not permitted in the city, and he'll go into a little bit more detail about that. And finally, a couple procedural remarks. I always ask that all of the testimony that's offered, both from the city official that's here tonight to represent the city side of it, and our appellants, is done under oath, as well as any public participation. I guess finally, we will have between 10 and 30 days from the public hearing to issue the decision if it isn't made tonight. So at that, I will be available all evening, obviously, to answer any procedural questions that may come up related to the appeal that is before you tonight. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, BZA.
In the audience, are those Are there any people who are going to testify in regard to this application? Maybe? Is the applicant here?
We are the applicant.
And you'll be testifying?
Yes.
And if you're going to testify, please stand, raise your right hand. If you give testimony tonight, do you swear that the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, as you shall answer to God?
I do.
Thank you. Will the applicant approach and state his case? Bear in mind, this is an appeal from the denial of your application.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. So we do have a PowerPoint presentation just to kind of coincide with this Twinsburg project in the concern around this. So my name is Jeff Swinford. I'm one of the operating partners with Midwest Shooting Center. Alongside me today is my fellow operating partner, Dave Sabo. We thought we would start just by briefly giving a quick overview of the brand, and then we'll move into our points of appeal and some facts concerning our business. In addition to both Dave and myself as the founding members, we have a third partner as well, Dr. Sam Patel. A little bit of background about us. Dave and I served in the military together, and after our military obligation, we actually got our start in entrepreneurship as franchisees for a national fitness chain called Anytime Fitness. So we grew that network, and we actually sold it. We actually grew it to 20 units total, all in Ohio, and sold it in late 2019. And then just a little bit of background on Dr. Patel. He's an orthopedic surgeon based out of the Lima, Allen County area, also an entrepreneur in his own right, and he sits on the board with us and assists with high-level business strategy. All of the operating partners, Dave, Sam, and myself, we're all Ohio-based. In addition, each of our individual locations has anywhere between 30 and 50 shareholders. They're all silent in the actual business operation itself, all of which are accredited investors, and this includes our Twinsburg project as well, which we have about 30 investors for this project. Our brand is growing very fast. We anticipate having in excess of 250 employees at the end of this year, all of which are paid very well. Relative to the industry and other comparative professions. They earn anywhere between $30,000 and $80,000 annually. And each individual unique location has an employee structure that supports anywhere between 30 and 35 employees. Our turnover is very limited and very well controlled, less than 5% reliably, and we feel like that speaks directly towards the quality of employment we provide. We routinely see about 2,000 visitors per location, per store, per week. And that's largely through our retail department. They also visit to support other departments of the business, like our training department, gunsmithing, and just other supporting areas of the business as well. And finally, each of our locations, again, reliably produces anywhere between $8 and $12 million in annual revenue. So this is a collage of images that represents the quality of product we bring with Midwest Shooting Center. In fact, all 4 of our existing operating units are reflected in this image. And it takes about $10 million to bring a Midwest Shooting Center to a new market, $7 million of those dollars typically being invested in the real estate. This is a representation of what a retail store would look like inside of a Midwest Shooting Center. And again, this is retail only. It's a little over 10,000 total square feet. And in fact, you're only seeing half of a retail department here. The other half is obscured behind that wall on the left side. And we pull customers from a broad spectrum of clientele. From novices to experts. So we anticipate hiring about 30 individuals from the local area. We anticipate an annual payroll spend of anywhere between $1.2 and $1.4 million. Again, this is an image that would reflect an example of one of our retail departments, again, retail only. Again, these facilities produce upwards of $12 million approximately in annual revenue, and we do draw our customer base from about a 50-mile radius, and that's 50 miles surrounding each individual location. So in addition to being a high-volume retailer, we also have an integrated range component attached. This is very much in line with the way that the industry has been trending. Adding integrated ranges to support and bolster the retail department or the retail function of the business. And by doing so, it allows us to offer additional programs like Tribal 45 programs. It allows our customers to rent a firearm and make an educated buying decision. And it also allows us to offer things like training and education classes. A large segment of our customer base are new to firearms, new firearm owners, and they're looking for guidance on things like how to properly store, how to properly care for, how to properly use the firearm that they're buying. So rather than just selling them the firearm, we'd like to provide the training and education that should go along with it. And I should also note as well that we are part of a retail buy group in this industry. That privilege is reserved to top 10% of retail performers, of which we are. And that allows us to purchase our inventory direct from manufacturers and cut out the middleman, which is just conventional distribution. So this is an aerial view of our Sylvania location, and the reason why we show this is to point out that all of our locations operate in the heart of residential areas. So this location, for example, shares its space with a shopping center. It has several other adjoining tenants unrelated to the Midwest Shooting Center business. It actually has a shared wall with a Goodwill. Across the street, we have a high-volume Kroger. On the corner, we have a CVS store, and we're about 25 feet removed from a high-income residential neighborhood. This location is in one of the healthiest, most vibrant parts of the Sylvania community, and it's actually operating as a community staple at this point. So we're proud of that location, and that's reflective of all of our MSC locations. So just a quick overview on our timeline to illustrate our progression through the industry. In 2016, we were an online retailer only. In 2017, we opened our first brick and mortar establishment. It was a retail-only store. In 2019, we expanded the brand by opening our first Midwest Shooting Center and adding the integrated range component. And again, this is very much in line with keeping up with the industry's progression by doing so to bolster and reinforce the retail department. In 2020, we received the NSSF 5-star rating. So the NSSF is the governing body in our industry, and that 5-star rating is an accolade that basically acknowledges us as being one of the premier operators in the industry as a whole. In addition to that, we acquired 3 more sites for expansion: our Sylvania location, McCandless, Pennsylvania, which is the north side of Pittsburgh, and also Fort Wayne, Indiana. In 2021, we opened all 3 of those additional locations, all on time and all exactly as we had set out in terms of quality and consistency for our brand. And then fast forward to today, 2022, we're currently in contract for a site in Beaver Creek, Ohio, Dayton area. Of course, the Twinsburg location, Cincinnati, and Greenwood, Indiana, Indianapolis area, all set for 2022 openings. So now we'll transition to points of appeal.
Does anybody have any questions before we move to this section? Okay. Okay, so going into our points of appeal here, first we're going to lead off with the legal support of our appeal. We, given the breadth of the business, we are not about wasting anybody's time. We would not be here if we didn't feel there was a basis of legal support to overturn this decision. Secondly, we're going to refute the building commissioner's decision. And then lastly, we're just going to go into a little snippet on really what MSC can provide the community of Twinsburg. So legal support, primary use, which for us is the retail side of the business. You heard Matt talk about that in his opening. That is permitted by right. As most of you know, Gander Mountain operated out of this facility for a number of years. The criteria applied to determine primary use versus incidental use is simply not supported by how courts have judged such matters here in Ohio. The zoning restrictions cannot be extended to include limitations not clearly prescribed or defined. Ohio precedent says that, and so does Twinsburg ordinance, and we'll get to that here in a few minutes. The terms sporting goods store use, incidental, and customarily are all undefined in the Twinsburg zoning code. Principal use is defined, and again, we'll get to that here in a second. The building commissioner simply created his own definitions of the above terms and used criteria in making his determination that are in stark contrast to what Ohio courts have used as their support in similar decisions. The approach the commissioner took is also in stark contrast to the local Twinsburg ordinances, as we'll see here in a second. So how did the building commissioner base his decision? He based it on the following. He said that our business name includes shooting center. And he said that indicated that our principal use of the proposed facility is related to shooting firearms, not exclusively the sale of firearms and/or firearms accessories. He said that Midwest Shooting Center sells memberships, training classes, and access to the range in addition to retail product. He said that indicates sporting goods sales is not our primary use. He came with the general opinion that the shooting range, memberships, and training are all the centerpiece of the Midwest Shooting Center operation, which is entirely false. The task at hand for the building commissioner was simply to determine, one, whether or not retail sales is our primary use, and two, whether or not the shooting range is incidental and customary to that use. That was the task at hand. The criteria the building commissioner used in his determination is not supported, again, by Ohio legal precedent, nor is it supported by the Twinsburg Codified Ordinance Section 1105 Tax 01. So how does the Ohio court system define these undefined terms, that are undefined in the Twinsburg Codified Ordinance? They define customarily as agreeing with or established by custom, established by common usage. They define incidental as anything which is usually connected with the principal use, something which is necessary, appertaining to, depending on the principal use. Undefined terms, which again, these are in Twinsburg, should be liberally construed in support of the landowner, which would be us. Criteria from the Ohio court system on assessing primary use: they've used comparative area, they've used number of employees engaged in the principal use versus the incidental use, and revenue generated by the primary use versus the incidental uses. Twinsburg Codified Ordinance has a definition of principal business activity, which is listed here. And what they say is that a principal business activity has a substantial portion of its displayed merchandise, which consists of said items, has a substantial portion of the wholesale value of its displayed merchandise, which consists of said items, has a substantial portion of the retail value of its displayed merchandise, which consists of said items, derives a substantial portion of its revenue from the sale or rental for any form of consideration of said items, and maintains the substantial section of its interior business space for the sale or rental of said items. And so the next few slides, we're going to kind of break these down in sections. So from the Ohio court system, as they define customary, incidental, as you can see here, this is from the NSSF, which is kind of like our governing body. This has a breakdown of all the FFLs here in the United States, and really whether or not they have a range or not. So if you look at those first three lines and add them up, 66.62% of brick and mortar FFLs have an indoor or outdoor range as an incidental use to their business. This is growing rapidly, and by 2028, they anticipate 80% of FFLs will have a range integrated into the business. I don't know how else you can define incidental to or customary other than this. I mean, this is where the industry is and where it's going. Next, from the Ohio court system, again, if you compare the criteria that they use to determine primary use relative to what the building commissioner used in his denial, they use comparative area, number of employees engaged in the principal versus incidental use, and they also use revenue generated by the primary use versus incidental uses. So how does this apply to Midwest Shooting Center? Comparative area, MSC, depending on the location, we use between 65 and 75% of our facility for retail operations. That includes merchandising and displaying retail products. That includes how we intake and store inventory and backstock, and administrative support of the department. If we use the criteria around employees engaged in the different activities, all of our employees are engaged in our principal use, which is retail. All of our employees sell retail products. As a percentage of total labor hours, about 10% get allocated to our range, and that's really for safety and education purposes through training. And then lastly, revenue generated by the primary use versus the incidental use. Non-range activities in our business in 2021 generated 96.83% of our revenue. The range accounted for only 3.17% of our revenue. Retail only accounted for 78.12%. So to say that retail sales is not our primary use is, I mean, we wouldn't be in business if we couldn't sell product. So and then looking to the Twinsburg Codified Ordinance, their definition of the principal business activity, and I'm not going to read all these again, but if you go down the list here, 100% of our displayed merchandise relates to retail sales. 100% of our wholesale value of displayed merchandise relates to retail sales. 100% of our retail value of displayed merchandise relates to retail sales. Retail only revenues were 78.12% of total revenue. 65 to 75% of our facility is dedicated to retail sales or direct support of retail sales. The building commissioner disregarded this section of the ordinance when making his determination.
Yeah, so just to kind of circle up here. So why would a Midwest Shooting Center be beneficial to the Twinsburg community? We are a top-tier business. We would be bringing a top-tier business to the Twinsburg community. In addition, we focus on safety and education, not just the actual transaction of retail product. Additionally, in 6 years of operating in this industry, we have never had a single safety violation with any of the agencies for which we're required to maintain compliance. This includes the EPA, OSHA, or the ATF. And as I had touched on previously, we will be hiring about 30 individuals from the local area. Expect an annual payroll spend of up to $1.4 million, all subject to local withholdings, and an annual taxable revenue of up to $12 million. And then finally, with us reliably drawing from a 50-mile radius, this is customer traffic that would come to the Twinsburg area and support local Twinsburg businesses inevitably. So just some facts about our business to provide some clarity around how we do what we do and how we're able to build a facility that allows for the live fire of firearms next to adjoining businesses that are unrelated. So whenever we do this, the shooting area itself is a self-contained unit within the facility itself. It shares no walls with the exterior of the building. It is built specifically for and inside of the facility. It's built using 4 core-filled concrete walls on all sides that extends all the way up to the roof deck, has a decoupling system installed around the walls and below the roof joists. We have very specialized insulation, and the entire self-contained unit is shrouded or encapsulated with a very specialized jacket, which captures all of the noise. It's a very impressive system, and in fact, if you were standing in our retail department, you would be very hard pressed to even hear any shooting activity that might be going on. In addition, the interior of this self-contained shooting unit is lined with ballistic steel, and with that ballistic steel, we actually adhere thick rubber membranes. The downrange area is made of granulated rubber, and behind that, we have ballistic steel as well. So the way that this is designed, when a projectile is fired, rather than outdated technology where that projectile is allowed to deform or splatter or fragment, the projectile is absorbed entirely, whole, undeformed in this rubber, and that makes for a very clean, very safe, very quiet range. This is the highest tech in the industry. It's very expensive. We spare no expense when we build these. And this is also the same technology that our military uses for their indoor ranges as well. Our bays are 100% sealed, and this is required for several reasons. One of those reasons would be the specialized HVAC system we use for the self-contained shooting bay. So this HVAC system is entirely independent and separate from the facility's climate control HVAC system. And this system is designed to exchange 100% of the air inside of that bay continuously. It provides a continuous laminar flow away from the firing line, removes all of the air contamination, and maintains a complete clean air environment at the firing line. That bad air gets swept downrange, circulated up and into our HEPA vac system, or our HEPA filter system, rather. So in addition to having our specialized HVAC system, we also have an EPA-certified lead management and disposal process to ensure zero environmental impact. As I had mentioned previously, in 6 years of operating in this industry, we have never had a single ATF violation. We've been in 100% compliance. In over 6 years of retailing product, that's a lot of compliance. Additionally, we have range safety officers on duty at all times in our range, anytime the range is in use. We also provide comprehensive training and education for new shooters, which again is a very big segment of our customer base. And then finally, with the actual self-contained shooting bays, they are 100% sealed, and there is a 0% chance of any projectile escaping that system the way that it is constructed.
Okay, I know there was a lot there, so just to wrap up here, kind of boil this down. Property's currently zone C3, which is our interchange business district. Historic use of the building has been sporting goods retail. Sporting goods retail is our primary use. This use is supported by right per the zoning code. Being that sporting goods retail is our primary use, the shooting range is also used by right if it's customary and incidental, which we believe it is. Criteria used by the Ohio court support that the shooting range being customary and incidental to the primary sporting goods retail use is in place. And we formally request that the board overturn the building commissioner's denial of our occupancy permit on the basis that sporting goods sales is our primary use and the range is incidental to that primary use. Given the nature of this incidental use, we are open to operating under conditions, which is not a uncommon thing, set by the board relating to noise, safety, or any other claims that we make here today. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, I have some questions for you, gentlemen.
Yes.
Okay.
Are you aware of Rule 1501, 31, 2903 of the Ohio Revised Code?
Can you read it, just 'cause I don't have...
It's called shooting ranges. Are you aware of that law?
I don't know that I'm aware of that specific law.
So you've never had to comply with this law, or you never knew about it?
What does it say? I mean,
It says, in accordance with 153384 of the Revised Code, the chief of the Division of Wildlife hereby establishes standards for shooting ranges in Ohio.
Mhm.
So there are standards. Do you know what those standards are?
we honestly have never been, no municipality that we've done any business in has cited that law.
Well, this municipality is asking if you're aware of that law.
We are not aware of that law.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that law, but I would be comfortable saying in front of you today that we would comply with all those standards.
It's only 5 pages long.
Yeah, that sounds like this industry.
Yeah. What are you going to sell in the retail store?
So we sell a mix of product on the retail store, anywhere from firearms to accessories to firearms, items relating to that industry generally, to include emergency equipment,
Bags.
Bags, cases, cleaning equipment, apparel, things along those lines. The stuff that you would typically expect in a sporting goods retailer.
Okay. And how does that translate into the right to have a shooting range?
Well, I mean, again, with us operating a retail business and the way that the industry has trended, again, the majority of, as Dave mentioned, FFL holders, and what an FFL holder is, that's a federal firearm licensee, that is a firearm retailer, has trended towards the integrated range aspect. So one point that I touched on is that it allows customers to make an informed buying decision, for example. Another one would be the training and education aspect, which we feel like we have a moral obligation operating in this industry to provide along with that product.
How many shooting ranges do you have on retail stores where you sell guns and other paraphernalia?
We have 4.
4?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you have any that don't have a shooting range?
We do not.
Okay. Are you aware of what an accessory use or structure is under our code?
I guess I would ask for clarity on that question.
Oh, it's defined as a use of land or structure or portion thereof, customarily incidental and subordinate to the principal use of the land or structure and located on the same parcel with principal use. It's one of our laws. The problem I'm having is it doesn't seem to me that the sale of retail goods that you have in your retail store automatically assumes that you're going to have a shooting range. You see what my point is?
Yeah, I do see what your point is, and I suppose I would have to ask for professional clarity around customary and incidental, understanding that the vast majority of this space, retail firearm operators, are trending towards operating with an integrated range component to be able to add these additional amenities that we feel like have been missing prior to this progression.
I understand your feelings, but the question is, have you run into this before, where you have to have a separate shooting range that's incidental to the principal retail uses that you're making?
I suppose to answer your question directly, I'd say we have not ran into this issue before in any of the other markets where we operate.
The other markets that we operate required entirely rezone, or we got a special use permit. So it was a kind of a different process.
Well, I'm a little bothered that you're not familiar with the statute of the state of Ohio in regard to shooting ranges, and I'm a little bothered by, frankly, the idea that a retail store that sells guns and other shooting paraphernalia automatically is entitled to a shooting range.
Yeah, and I don't know that we would say automatically entitled is the language that we would use. It is our interpretation of the way the law is written and understanding how customary is defined, understanding how incidental is defined, and how to interpret or slant the undefined terms, which we have in this case. And so, in our opinion, and based on the research we have done and the facts surrounding firearm retailers and the majority of firearm retailers in this industry and how the industry has progressed, our interpretation is that it is incidental, it is customary, and for that reason we have a right.
We wouldn't become enemies if we had a different interpretation up here.
No, of course not. No, of course not.
Mr. Chair, may I interject? I think it's, speaking of customary, generally the city staff member gets the opportunity to make a couple remarks just to set forth,
Sure.
what the appellants are here to talk about tonight. With the permission of the board, could building commissioner make a statement?
Go ahead.
Thank you. As my report to the board, on February 3rd, 2022, we received an application for business registration for the Midwest Shooting Center located at 2695 Creekside Drive. After reviewing the application and all the information submitted by Midwest Shooting Center, I determined that only the retail and or firearm accessory sales portion of the business may be permitted at the site due to the fact that firearms and or firearms accessories sales may be considered sporting goods sales. Sporting goods sales use is a permitted use in the C3 district. However, the proposed shooting range use is neither a permitted or primary use nor a permitted accessory use. Specifically, a shooting range use is not a listed permitted primary use in the district. It is also not a permitted accessory use because shooting range use is not clearly incidental and customarily related to a sporting goods or firearms retail store. So for the purpose of this hearing, I'm going to read into the record my findings as outlined in my letter dated February 24th, 2022. The proposed business location is situated in a C3 interchange business district. Section 1148.06 of the Twinsburg Zoning and Development Regulations allows sporting goods store as primary permitted use in the C3 district. Firearm range and or shooting range or a similarly described use is not identified as a primary permitted use in the C3 district. Accessory uses that are clearly incidental to and customarily related to the primary permitted use are permitted in the C3 district. So based upon this, the proposed sale of firearms and/or firearm accessories may be categorized within the primary permitted use category of sporting goods store in the C3 district. The proposed indoor firearm range is neither a primary permitted use nor a permitted accessory use to the primary use of the sporting goods or firearm sales. My determination was reached after considering the proposed use and an analysis of the City of Twinsburg zoning and development regulations, including the following information. Number one, the business name provided by the applicant, Midwest Shooting Center, indicates that the principal use of the proposed facility is related to shooting firearms, not exclusively the sale of firearms and/or firearm accessories. Number two, material provided by the applicant indicates, quote, at any given time, our facilities have between 100 and 200 customers that are actively training within our trainers, unquote. Also, quote, twice weekly we hold concealed carry classes and regularly train approximately 1,100 individuals per year per facility via this class, unquote. A membership program is hosted that supports range use activities. The proposed facility includes a 20-lane shooting range broken down into 2 shooting bays, with 1 shooting bay dedicated to firearms training and another shooting bay used for members to shoot and may be rented to customers for additional use. Additionally, on site, there are 75 to 80 firearms for rent to use in the firearms range. Number 3, the applicant's business model is constructed around shooting range activities, or as stated in the material provided by the applicant, quote, Midwest Shooting Center is a state-of-the-art indoor shooting center, unquote. Number 4, material provided by the applicant indicates that the shooting range, memberships for shooting range, and training at the shooting range are the centerpiece of the Midwest Shooting Center operation. In conclusion, only retail firearms and/or accessory sales may be permitted at the site due to the fact that firearm sales and/or accessory sales may be considered sporting goods sales, which is a permitted use. However, as I stated previously, a shooting range use is not a listed permitted primary use in the district. It is also not a permitted use, accessory use, because the shooting range use is not clearly incidental and customarily related to a sporting goods or firearms retail store. That concludes my report.
Thank you. I also wish to point out that the location of the proposed use is in a trafficked area that includes college students from Kent State University, that includes a motel and hotel residents at the Comfort Inn, that the traffic is extensive, and those are concerns of what you have in the vicinity of what you're asking for. Any questions from the board of the applicants? Any observations? Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Sorry to keep interrupting. I believe you also indicated that we would ask for public participation.
I did ask for public.
Oh, then my apologies.
Is there anybody here that wishes to speak on the subject?
I'd just like to say a couple things.
Come on up here.
My name is Scott Rayfuse. I own Brewster's Restaurant right next door. I also own the building there that has tenants being a barber shop and a family learning center for kids to learn how to play instruments. Probably not a good mix, although I agree with the right to do specific things. I don't think it's the right area for that type of retail/shooting range. I don't think I'd be a happy neighbor. That's all I want to say.
Any questions of Mr. Appice? Thank you, sir.
And then, Mr. Chair, if I may interrupt hopefully one last time.
Sure.
With permission of the board, I'd like to invite the applicants, or the appellants rather, to come back up and offer any closing remarks before you dig into your discussion as a board.
Sure. Well, we appreciate everybody's time and everyone that came to participate, no matter what side of the question you're on. We appreciate everybody's support. We are very familiar with operating in areas just like this. Our facilities are designed to operate in areas just like this with adjoining tenants in a shopping center that are unrelated to the, what we do as a business generally. As such, our technology and our model is built around that. And we understand everyone's concerns, particularly regarding the high traffic area. We have college students transiting this area. These are considerations we have in all of our current markets where we operate, and we do it very successfully, and we have been a significant value add to those communities. So we understand that, we appreciate that. We appreciate the input on both sides. We do pledge to be a strong contribution to this community if we're allowed to participate as a local Twinsburg business. We'll be a staple of this community, and we will make the community proud if we are allowed to operate here. And with that, we appreciate everyone's time and attention tonight.
We appreciate your presentation, too. I do want to read into the record a letter that we received from a Twinsburg resident, Miss Melanie Delaney. I am in agreement, dear Mr. Folks, that's Keith. I am in agreement with your position to deny a permit involving an indoor firearms shooting range located on the property at 2695 Creekside Drive. The property is close to the Kent State campus where young adults and other students are coming and going throughout the day. I do not support the addition of firearm businesses to busy commercial or residential areas within the Twinsburg community. If we have no other evidence to be presented,
No.
including the testimony of Mr. Folks and the documentation and the testimony of the applicants, do I have a motion?
I have a motion that we consider Mr. Folks' representation.
To deny the, the motion is to affirm the denial.
Affirm the denial.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Roll call?
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Wilner,
Yes.
Mr. Kanzler,
Yes.
and Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Okay. You have a right to appeal to City Council, and I think you can understand where we're coming from on this. We understand your position. Is there any other business before the board? Having none, ask for a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call? Let's do it easy. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.